How's it going, everyone? It is Prashan here. We're going over the top decks of the week in Marvel Snap. Tucker, sorry, he's not here today because he's on vacation. So we got Docty here, the homie Docty, to help out and critique and talk about some of these decks here. How's it going, Docty?
Zooey Mama is going great. Happy to be here in place of Tucker. I hope he's having a great vacation. But this is a little treat of my own to cover these decks with the one, the only Prashant. So I'm excited to talk about these.
Yeah, for sure. Then maybe one day we could get all three of us to do something cool.
Yes, sir.
In the Snapverse. So we're going to go over the tier list of Marvel Snap here. So we have Surfer, Patriot, and Shuri, which is A tier. And then we have High Evo, Tribunal, and Hela Tribunal as the B tier in Marvel Snap. So what are your thoughts on this tier list as far as like the masses go in Marvel Snap?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think it shows that you can kind of just be really greedy. I mean, there's just not many tech cards running around. Okay, sometimes you see Red Guardian, but you're not seeing things to get rid of a limboed lane. So, you know, these full-on Toxic Surfer decks that go to turn 7, they can do it fairly safely. Patriot decks aren't too worried. They're just playing Patriot and Ultron. You can hide it behind Invisible Woman. You're not really scared of Goliath right now. And then even Shuri decks. Again, that's like one of the easier decks to kind of counter. And we're just not seeing much tech. A lot of people are even cutting Shang-Chi now, so they kind of just get away with it, right? It's just these big power decks. Like, they just slam down power on the board. And if your opponent can't stop it, you win.
Yeah, I think everyone's on the offensive right now and not on the defensive. So you don't really see that many like Sarah control decks around because all these decks are going so tall and they have so many options that these Sarah decks can't even handle them. So let's go into, I believe this is the top deck of all Marvel Snap right now. We are going to go into this safety lockdown list. Once it pops up here, there we go. Safety lockdown. So basically here, everyone's complaining about one of two cards here, and it's Professor X and Cannonball. So what are your thoughts on Professor X right now and this Professor X lockdown Cannonball meta?
You know, Lockdown always has a meta where it shines. Okay, at the end of the day, Professor X used to be complained about as a 5/3, and it was when you ramped up with Thanos, and now as a 5/1, here it is again, like a zombie, just being an absolute menace again. You know, it's an insanely strong ability. Give it time, it will always find use. And part of it's because of cards like Hela, right? If you've got your opponent slapping down big power, if you lock off a lane, that's actually a way to stop the big power. And this synergy with Cannonball is huge. One lane you lock down with Professor X, the other lane you win with Cannonball, because it's going to move to the third lane you don't care about, or it's going to kill the card if the lane is full. So we just got like the dynamic duo here, and man, they're just running amok everywhere, right? They're everywhere on ladder, lower ranks, high ranks. I mean, these cards are everywhere right now.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of this is cause and effect with Marvel Snap.
Yes.
So, like, you got rid of Goliath where you wanted to have priority. That way you could use your Goliath. But now, since Goliath is gone, you don't want to have priority. That way you could use your Cannonball. And then the fact that Hela went crazy, the only way to stop Hela was to lock down a lane. That way you could only worry about the other two lanes. So it's a lot of cause and effect, and the fact that people are actually countering the old meta, they're mad about the new meta, but that's gonna happen. So if Professor X gets nerfed, I think a lot of it's with Ravonna. Like, even though Psylocke has always been around, like Ravonna, like I guess gives you that option always. You don't have to worry about playing Psylocke exactly
it's the new
on
Zabu.
two.
Yeah, she's the new Zabu. You know, Zabu got nerfed. He's on a reveal. But you want an ongoing card that's giving you a discount every turn. And Ravonna does that. She gives you the 4-cost Professor X, the 1-cost Thena, and Angela. You know, it's really strong. Mobius, you would think we'd see more Mobius right now. Some decks are putting it in, and you're basically just putting it in because of Ravonna. She's everywhere as well. She's maybe she's the problem, right? Maybe she's what's making Professor X the problem.
Yeah, I think originally when she came out, right, she was like a 3-2 or a 3-3 or something.
She was bad when she
Yeah,
came out.
like
Yes,
she
same
felt
month as
so.
Mobius.
Yeah,
They switched. They switched. He was a 2 cost.
Yeah, like they felt so awkward. She felt so awkward as a
Mhm.
3, but as a 2, like you said before, like she's the new Zabu. Like we had to replace and try to get our cards out quicker because it's all about
Yeah.
outpacing the opponent.
Uh-huh.
So I feel like if there was like a nerf or like a OTA coming, I think that she would probably be the card that's touched first, and then maybe Professor X gains like more power. That way, he's not affected by Ravonna. We'll see.
Maybe. He was a bit of problem at 5-3, but yeah, you could make him a 5-2. Another thing is, again, we would see more Mobius. I've been playing him a bit to counter Ravonna because it does shut it down, right? It's not like they even really have time. They have one turn to take advantage of it, but it's not early enough for Professor X. So maybe you make Mobius a 3-4, right? It's just a little bit better, but that means that sees more play, which does hurt Ravonna. It's going to hurt the Sage. Overall, this deck just has so many little things that power up, and you lock down one lane with Professor X, and it's basically a done deal.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like it's over, and it's simple too. It's an easy combo to learn.
Yeah.
So
easy for everyone, yeah.
Since Tucker's on vacation, this is the deck that Tucker gave us to talk about here. It's called Origin, which is pretty interesting because last season I climbed with a stature deck last season because I thought it was fun, and it's came back.
Yeah, this deck is very interesting. I mean, it's got a lot of pieces, right? We're looking at the Darkhawk package with the Rockslide Korg, so okay, great. It's paired with this Black Bolt Stature package, which is kind of like an old throwback. Remember when that deck was everywhere?
Yeah, the good
and
stats.
Darkhawk got nerfed, Stature got nerfed, Black Bolt got nerfed. But then we've also got the Sentry Annihilus Hood package. So this deck is just like 3 good packages, and you add Shang-Chi and America Chavez. I mean, it's a pretty crazy deck in that sense, but it's just got some good cards, and it's got the tech with the discard. And I said most decks aren't running tech cards, and so if you can disrupt your opponent, that can go a long way right now.
Right. So like the Silver Samurai like goes after those tribunal decks that are hiding that Iron Man.
Oh yeah.
Or even Professor X too. So Samurai can target both of those cards to just disrupt whatever's going on. So this is semi like a meta attacker in a way, especially at Silver Samurai and Black Bolt. And then you have the Clog as well, as long as you could get your Annihilus off before they could play like Hela on 6. So it's pretty decent as far as like the disruption and giving them rocks too. So pretty decent as long as you know how to play it. Like you have to know how to play these decks.
Yeah, it's just good power too. It does slap down good power on the board, especially with the discounted stature if you sneak that in the final turn.
Oh yeah, final turn, you just play Stature and Annihilus. Like that wins you a lot of games.
Yeah.
And then next here, we have this Alpha Raymond William deck by Gnome, which is pretty interesting too, because I've been seeing a lot of Thor and Beta Ray Bill shenanigans lately too.
Yeah, I think Pixie has been making a bit of a resurgence. You know, we see Pixie here. I've seen Pixie in some different Patriot lists and some other kinds of lists. Like, she's been really creeping up. And it's nice too because Pixie likes Mobius, because if you draw one of your cheaper cards and they got switched to like a 6 cost, they're now back at their original cost. And so Mobius is helping your Pixie, but it's also countering these Ravonnas as we talked about. Yeah. So I think that's actually helped Pixie decks because they already pretty much all run Mobius already. And then yeah, these Thors, the Beta Ray Bills. I mean, it's so cheesy, right? Your opponent knows what's coming. But Jane Foster is now 9 power. There is less Shang-Chi out there. There's less Cosmo. It's one of those things, again, if your opponent can't stop it and you slap down both Hammers and Odin, you're just blowing them off the board, right?
Right, and then you have blink value too. So the blink with the 0 cost, like Wasp and Yellow Jacket, you could just play a 0 cost and you could play blink and then get value like so easily. So that package is in there as well. And then like there's nothing but up, right? you hit nothing but good targets. Like Nico maybe might be wonky. You
The
just
worst,
don't want to
probably,
destroy
yeah.
your next card or turn it into a demon. But you have Pixie,
Mhm.
Mobius, Thor. Like everything else is a good hit as far as blink.
Right. Yeah, no, this one goes big.
Oh yeah, for sure. So shout out to Gnome. I'll get him back on the channel soon. And then next here we have this Ika Eternal High Evo deck, which is pretty interesting too because it has Thena and it has Gilgamesh. So it takes advantage of the power gainage as far as like Sunspot. You have Misty Knight constantly giving like random power to your cards. Of course, you have the Angela package too. So you're just siphoning your Angela. So it's a pretty decent package. And then of course you have Hulk that gains power too. And then you have the Kitty Pryde Hope Summers package that fuels the whole deck throughout the game, which is pretty interesting. And then you have Enchantress the counter too.
Yeah, this deck is a really good use of Gilgamesh, like you mentioned. Everyone's basically playing him with Blue Marvel, right? Or maybe doing like Patriot stuff.
Right.
But really interesting point you made with Misty Knight. It's good that she's hitting different cards each turn, because each time she hits a new one, that's +1 more for Gilgamesh. So it's a really good use for him. And then obviously Thena, I mean, we talked about her a bit with the Slayer Blade deck. Thena's just really strong. So slotting her in a deck when you can is really good. And I don't even think it's too hard to still float energy because you've got Kitty Pryde who you can keep playing, right? So you're still floating some energy. So Cyclops can trigger getting the extra energy with Hope. Enchantress, a nice little bit of tech, just kind of the one real tech card in here. But yeah, I mean, high Evo decks go hard. This one doesn't rely on magic for a 7 turn, so it's less prone to being countered because of that. So this one's solid, very original deck for Gilgamesh as well. This is a good deck by Ika.
Yeah, shout out to Ika. And then next here we have this Gilgamesh Zoo. This has been floating around in Marvel Snap. My thoughts on it is sometimes your opponent knows what's going on already. That way they can like counter it right away. And then basically you're trying to get like a free Mockingbird and a Gilgamesh on the final turn. So I think this deck is interesting if you know how to play it, but I don't think is as strong as the other decks. But it's definitely a Gilgamesh cook, and that's what people look for, the cooks for the season pass card. What are your thoughts on this brew?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I mean, it's like when you first see Gilgamesh, you think of a deck like this, right? Like, I just want all these cards on the board, they're powered up. What's the easiest way to do that? Blue Marvel, he powers up everything.
Yeah.
As a backup, you have like the Khazar. Okay, now we got a lot of 1-drops. We need the Kyra to protect them. We got these tokens put in Mockingbird. I mean, it's a very like straightforward kind of intuitive build. In reality, though, the deck does go wide, like you're spreading power over the board, but it's a lot of low powered cards. And while you're powering them up with the Blue Marvel, with the Khazar, you know, you're not going to compete with Hela bringing back huge power stuff all the time. You're not going to compete with the Silver Surfer playing Wong and Surfer. And so this deck, it's not greedy enough, in my opinion, right? It looks like it should outpower stuff, but there's so many decks that are going big and wide. They're just adding power to every lane right now, as we talked about. So it's actually tough for this one to compete. And then, of course, if you were limited to locations, if one location you couldn't play in, or you could only play, you know, expensive cards in, it's a no-go, right? You know, I mean, this one needs board space, and you know, it's kind of limited there.
Yeah, you definitely have to be mindful too. You don't want to just play a Squirrel Girl and then like Shayna or on curve and then fill up your board, and then
it's gonna fill up fast. Especially White Widow. White Widow's everywhere. Like even that one card, that Widow's Kiss. When you're playing a deck like this, you're adding Squirrels and Mysterios, like you mentioned. Like that one Widow's Kiss is really annoying. Just every board space counts.
Yeah, for sure. So it's an interesting brew, or this is probably one of the most obvious brews for Gilgamesh, but it's not that strong.
Yeah, it's made good for weekend missions when you're trying to complete those.
And then next, we have this Thanos brew. Thanos is back. I made this deck. This was basically to counter everything that was going on especially with all the lockdown stuff. You could just play Thanos as long as you have the Space Stone. I had a lot of opponents forget that Thanos can just go into Professor X lane, and they're like, "Oh crap!" So pretty interesting that Thanos is back. I feel like it's a bunch of side quests for him to reach his full potential, which I think should have been something that could have been Inception, like beginning of Thanos, instead of just the stones just doing random stuff. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the new Thanos change?
No, I agree. I agree, especially the Space Stone. I think that might be the strongest stone now. Like, if
Yeah.
I'm being honest, because I played it a bit, like right on Tuesday, when the patch happened and they changed him. And I normally don't play much Thanos, but I just did. I was streaming, and the second and third game I had him, there was a Professor X on my opponent's side of the board. Right, like he's just everywhere right now. So I'd slap, my opponent snapped too. They locked down a lane with Professor X and they snapped on turn 4 because they got the Ravana discount, right, like everybody's doing. And normally you snap on that if you got one lane secured, like good time. So turn 5, I play the Space Stone, the blue one, and that lets me play Thanos anywhere. Turn 6, boom, I just played Thanos on that Professor X lane. And I probably played him for 5 too because the green stone is, the time stone's discounting him. And so you're right. It does feel like a bunch of side quests to power up the big boss man, and it's awesome. Oh, yeah. I think the Space Stone. It went from being maybe the worst. I don't know if the Space Stone was the worst or the Power Stone were the worst, but it was at the bottom of the barrel. You basically just played it to draw. You didn't care about the move.
Right.
To now, in my opinion, in this meta, this might be the best. It's War Machine for Thanos, right?
Oh,
you
yeah,
play this
sure.
and you just War Machined your Thanos for one cost. I mean, it's awesome. I like the new Thanos, and I think he just feels better thematically, like you mentioned.
Right. And then it's weird, too, that you mentioned War Machine, because I have a feeling during that season, a lot of people had to make a lot of hard choices. So it's like you either got Cannonball or you got War Machine.
Yes.
Like it was a difficult decision for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people might have went War Machine instead of Cannonball. Yep. Just because, like, the concept.
It had a lot of hype. War Machine had so much hype, and, I do the polls, you do the polls on YouTube for new cards. So many people getting War Machine. It was probably 75% of the people that voted on my poll were going after him. It was probably like 25% going after Cannonball or some low number.
Right, that's how it was with me as well. So, and then, too, like Marvel Snap, there's a bunch of cause and effect, right? So, with War Machine, you were able to play Infinite. Right? And he was 20. And then a week later, Red Hulk comes out, and Red Hulk could get bigger than an Infinite. Right. So it's like, why are you playing War Machine when you could just play like War Machine and Infinite when you could just play Red Hulk?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good... Yeah, and you still have to pay the 6 energy for Infinite, so... Yeah, it just completely flipped. Cannonball now is obviously the much better value card.
Oh, yeah.
Than it was to pick up War Machine.
Yeah, and then same thing with Cannonball too. Like, I felt like Cannonball with like the Blob meta too. Like if Cannonball came out like right after the Blob meta, it would have been very interesting because Blob doesn't move.
Yes.
Blob would just turn into a rock no matter what.
Yeah.
So it's funny how like there's outrage on this card. But there's a card down the pipeline that was going to fix this card or make it not as powerful. Yeah, it would have
come a bit late. It would have come a bit late, right? You would have been like 4 months with OP.
Well, it was a few. Blob. It was like maybe 2 months, 3 months.
Well, Blob came out in December. I remember because I call it Blobcember. I call it Blobcember. But yeah, it was like towards the end.
Yeah, it was.
But yeah, you're right. They could even, if they buffed Blob a little bit right now, like what would that look like, right? How would that work with Cannonball? Because that helps out Cannonball. So,
right,
how strong would it be now? It'd be interesting.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. So, anything else you see in the meta? You want to talk about the meta this week or any decks?
I have been seeing. Obviously, there's a lot of Hela still. We talked about a little bit of why Professor X is solid because Hela takes a while to get going, right? You do your big play right on turn 6 with Hela. And so if you can lock down a lane, prevent that.
I have a Hela deck I don't even think I've been playing Hela, to be honest.
Good for you. That's a big win. If you don't have a Hela deck in your collection, You're all right by me. I mean, that's a big win.
Yeah, no
But
Hela.
we know what the Hela lists are. You just got big cards. You discard them with a Blade, Lady Sif, and you bring stuff back with Ghost Rider Hela. And again, it just works, right? It just kind of works. A Leech seemed like it'd be a good answer, but then they said Leech countered too many things. It stopped Hela, but it also stopped other cards. You could still play Leech. You know, Leech might still come back. He's a 5/5 now. It's decent stats. There's just not great answers to Hela besides Leech. You're just getting more power on your side of the board than they get, right? It's kind of hard to counter besides that.
It feels like they tried to stop Hela by having Leech be a 4 cost, but they realized how much more damage like Leech does by being the 4 cost that you can't
they
play
just need
any
to
other
nerf
card.
Hela. Yeah, they need to nerf Hela directly. They tried being indirect. It didn't work. Hit it at the source.
Yeah, it seems like that happens a lot in Marvel Snap. They try to go around the problem and see if it works, but I think it's more harm than good than just fixing the problem to begin with.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is it for the best decks in Marvel Snap or the weekly highlight. Tucker should be back next week from his vacation. nice and tan. But thank you for hanging out, Docty. Thank you for chilling. Where can everyone find you?
Of course, yeah, it's always a pleasure. You can find me on YouTube as well at Docty_Snap. I mainly cover new card videos and unreleased content, and I leave all the good deck brewing to Prashant. He's covering the best stuff always. So I appreciate being on here again. I appreciate the time, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Yeah, thank you for hanging out again. Till next time, guys, be safe, keep on snapping, and peace.